Welcome to another Howls and Growls breakdown. Today we're talking about a thing that has plagued the Minnesota Timberwolves all season and really has the potential to do so again in the playoffs. We are talking about Karl-Anthony Towns and the way he can really cause offensive issues for the Wolves. Now don't get me wrong, Towns is a great player having a great season, there's no debating that. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be such a massively important piece of Minnesota's puzzle. However, when it comes to Minnesota's biggest weaknesses as a team, he's really at the center of a lot of it right now. Ultimately, it comes down to turnovers, ball movement, and just generally inconsistent offense. When Towns is a play finisher as a shooter, a roll man, or a cutter, he is one of the league's most deadly scoring threats. Although almost a decade into his career, those things still live on the periphery far too often. Instead, Towns spends too much of his time posting up or driving into traffic. We've seen those areas kill him before in playoff settings, and while the Wolves as a team are much stronger than ever before, there's still a huge blind spot in his game and one of the few reasons to be skeptical about Minnesota in the playoffs this time around. You see here, when Towns is playing in the post or as a driver, he's really likely to turn the ball over and really unlikely to generate a good look for a teammate. And if you watch the Wolves, you'll know those are the two biggest things offensively that kill them. Too many of Towns' possessions seem to end up like this. It's a premeditated move that comes back into traffic, so now you've got these two players waiting already in gap help, and Cat is driving straight into that traffic. Ideally, that collapse creates a look out here for a 40% shooter in Naz Reid who's now open, but as we've seen, Towns' assist rate is really low and his passing rate is really low as well on these drives. So while he's doing his job creating advantages for others by being a scoring force, he's not finishing the task by making that simple pass. If he's not doing that, then all these possessions is a drive into nowhere with a low success rate. Again, he's already set his mind to drive here, even with this triangle of defenders expecting it. He drives into the help, ignores the first chance to get off the ball and escape danger, spins back into traffic, doesn't take the second chance to kick the ball out, and then eventually has to try a miracle pass to avoid a turnover, and ends up with one anyway. For a player who really does have great vision and a pretty deep playmaking bag for a big man, Towns misses a ton of opportunities to just make the simple play. He's got the scoring gravity to force this defender to step across and cover his drive, but he's not punishing that defender by making this easy read to the man who is now left open. And it's those offensive fouls that really drive up his turnover numbers. Right now, Towns leads the league in offensive fouls. So it's the drives, but it's also the post-ups that can make up a big chunk of Cat's usage and a big chunk of his turnover issues. And again, it's simple decision making that seems to kill him. If teams are going to bring a strong side double team at him, he needs to be able to make this easy pass. That will force the defender to rotate, so if McDaniels doesn't shoot himself, he can swing the ball to another open shooter. Instead, he spins away from the easy play and picks up an offensive foul in the process. Towns obviously has the skill and touch to be an all-world finisher in any situation, but his processing in these situations has been a detriment to the team's offense this season. Again, he's in the post, and he's got these two high-level helpers waiting here to snuff him coming on from the weak side. You kind of want to see him spin away from that and get himself into that open space so he can use that fantastic touch. But that flawed processing means he just dumps himself into the traffic and it's another turnover. And those live ball turnovers are the kind that lead to fast breaks and lead to easy buckets for the opposition. So not only does it drain the blood from Minnesota's offense, but it starts to chip away at their defense as well. Again, you've got Giannis waiting for a poor decision on this next possession, and rather than spinning to the strong side and forcing Lillard to step up as a vulnerable low man, he's turning back into danger, losing the ball, and gift wrapping transition points to the league's best transition player. Now, Towns is obviously a magnificent offensive player and an improved defender. He's having a good season and he's such an integral piece of this puzzle. The reason that this is something that has been nagging away at me throughout this season and really seems to be getting worse as the season progresses, is because it isn't a new thing. This is actually the same things that bothered him in the previous 2 playoff appearances. The Wolves are certainly good enough to win multiple playoff rounds this year, and maybe even more than that, but they're not going to do so if a locked-in team can scout Towns out of games like Denver did last season and Memphis did the season before. And it was all the same things we just examined earlier. Here in the series last year, he's faced with that same topside double team, and instead of making the quick read to either recycle the ball up to the top or spin off his man away from the defense, he waits too long, allows the defense to jam him up, and then allows Jamal Murray to get into the passing lane and turn it into easy points at the other end. This is the most important moment of the Grizzlies series a few years back. There's under a minute left. They're down by 1 with the series tied 2-2. The Wolves get into their split action where Anthony Edwards curls around to come downhill off a handoff. You see Edwards gets the space he desires, but Towns dribbles into the chasing defender instead of giving the easy handoff at the elbow. We saw him driving without a plan in the same way last season. He catches it here. Bruce Brown is going to shift over. Michael Porter Jr. is in gap help, and the drive is heedless and really easy to defend in the end. And again, this even goes back to the playoff series before that. He gets the ball on the run. It's a premeditated drive again. He misses this opportunity to kick the ball out and put the defense in rotation in the same way I mentioned earlier. And all it takes is a smart playoff level defensive rotation to get under him and cause a turnover. So this really isn't a new thing for Towns, but also for the coaching staff that seemingly encourages him to be in these positions consistently. What makes this frustrating is that Towns is so good in the areas that tend to be afterthoughts in his game. As you can see, he's an insane finisher and a low turnover proposition when he is acting as a roll man coming out of pick and roll, and we all know how great he is as a catch and shoot threat from deep, either in spot up situations or coming off a screen. Towns has been upping his 3-point volumes throughout the season, and that bodes well for the rest of Minnesota's campaign in both the regular season and the playoffs, but it'd be really beneficial if he would start taking more threes even when the defense is seemingly closing in on him, rather than trying to skirt around it and driving into those dangerous situations that we've been looking at. You can use this possession as a great example. Rather than trying to go around a mobile defender and then have to face the low man coming over through here, he just hits the brakes, steps back and nails the jumper. He's such an elite shooter that this should be a genuine option in his shot diet rather than just a rare highlight. If he was able to replace a bunch of his flailing drives with more threes, it almost seems a certainty that the team would turn it over less and score more effectively on a points per possession basis. Again, instead of coming off a ball screen and trying to barrel his way downhill, it'd be helpful to see a few more pull-up threes from his sweet spot at the top of the key. But even if Towns isn't going to shoot more threes to balance out his good with his bad, he needs to spend more time as a roll man. Again, you get more roll man possessions in favour of drives and post-ups, and automatically the offense gets a huge boost. Right now, Towns' frequency as a roll man who finishes possessions with a field goal attempt or a turnover is woefully low. You see here how far his drop-off is compared to other bigs who are able to stretch the floor and work inside the arc. It's a really steep drop-off. If Towns has an advantage created for him like a good pick and roll can do, he automatically becomes one of the league's premier finishers at the rim. You see when he comes out of this screen, his man is still in drop coverage, dealing with the ball handler over here, so Towns, as soon as he catches, he's dealing with the defender who is now shifting across, and a low man who is on the strong side shooter and afraid to come over and commit himself. That gives him a great angle to go and use that elite finishing around the rim. It's all about putting Towns in better positions to attack tilted defenses rather than him trying to plow through them on his own. You see it again here, when he catches, Vucevic isn't close enough. he still has to get over to stop Towns, and Towns is able to burn most bigs or even fours with his speed if he has a gap he can attack into without having to take 3 or 4 dribbles. And these are the things that make sense in the playoffs. Players like Mike Conley and Anthony Edwards are still going to create fruitful pick and roll possessions against playoff defenses, and Towns is always going to be able to get his jumper off against anybody if he has the right mindset to do it. In my opinion, incorporating those good elements into his scoring package and starting to eliminate those stray voltage threats is the only way he's going to be able to be a viable playoff player for the first time in his career, as Minnesota look to make some franchise history in this upcoming postseason. Thanks again for watching Howls and Growls. Please subscribe for more.